The sawdust beneath her knees was stained with whiskey and blood, but 10-year-old Lily Rose scrubbed harder anyway. Night after night, she cleaned the Silver Dollar Saloon's floors until her fingers cracked and bled, desperately hoping someone would notice her worth before the territorial authorities dragged her back to the hellish orphanage she'd escaped from. What she didn't expect was Sheriff Tom Garrett watching from the shadows, seeing something in this broken child that would change both their lives forever. This is the story of how one man's act of mercy sparked a battle against corrupt judges, territorial marshals, and a system designed to throw away unwanted children. You're about to witness how a single orphan girl cleaning saloon floors became the heart of an underground sanctuary that saved dozens of forgotten souls, and how a grieving sheriff found his purpose again by fighting the most powerful forces in Arizona territory. But first, they had to survive the night that would test whether love could triumph over law, whether family could be chosen rather than born, and whether two broken people could build something strong enough to withstand the storm coming for them. The wind howled through Copper Ridge like a banshee that October night, rattling the Silver Dollar's windows and sending tumbleweeds dancing down the main street. Inside, the saloon reeked of stale tobacco and spilled rot-gut whiskey. The last of the miners had stumbled out hours ago, leaving behind overturned chairs, crushed cigars, and puddles of God knew what staining the rough wooden floor. Lily Rose pushed a strand of matted brown hair from her eyes and dipped the scrub brush into the bucket of murky water. Her knees were raw from kneeling on the splintered boards, and her thin cotton dress, 3 sizes too big and held together with safety pins, offered no protection against the cold that seeped through the saloon's gaps. She'd been at this for 4 hours straight, working by the dim light of a single oil lamp that Martha Crane had begrudgingly left burning. Every board of that saloon floor had seen her tears at one point or another, but not tonight. Tonight she couldn't afford to cry. She needed to prove her worth before morning came, before someone decided a 10-year-old girl was more trouble than she was worth cleaning up after drunk miners and cattle drivers. Her name was Lily Rose, though she wasn't sure if that was real or something she'd made up during the long, hungry nights when she first ran from Pine Bluff Orphanage. She'd lost track of time, of birthdays, of everything except the desperate need to stay invisible while still being useful enough to keep around. They'd stopped counting birthdays at Pine Bluff once the donations dried up and the beatings started. She remembered her mother's lullabies less than she remembered the taste of watery gruel and the sound of leather straps whistling through the air. When Martha Crane found her sleeping behind the saloon's woodpile 3 weeks ago, shivering and half-starved, the woman had grudgingly offered her floor space in exchange for cleaning. Lily Rose had thought maybe she'd finally found somewhere safe. Maybe she could learn to tend bar or help in the kitchen, but she'd barely spoken to another soul since arriving. Martha fed her scraps and pointed to messes that needed cleaning. The saloon girls ignored her completely, and the customers, well, they looked through her like she was part of the furniture. The scrub brush wore smooth in her grip as she worked the same spot over and over, trying to remove a dark stain that might have been blood or tobacco juice or something worse. Her small hands were cracked from lye soap and cold water, and her back ached from hunching over, but she didn't dare stop. If she stopped, if she gave Martha any reason to complain, the woman might decide keeping a runaway orphan wasn't worth the risk. And then where would she go? Back to Pine Bluff, where Director Blackwood locked children in the root cellar for days without food. Back to sleeping in doorways and stealing crusts of bread just to survive another day. The saloon's back door creaked open, letting in a gust of frigid air that made the lamp flame dance. Lily Rose froze, her knuckles white around the brush handle. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor behind her, measured and deliberate. She didn't dare turn around. "You've been scrubbing that same spot for near 20 minutes, child." The voice was deep, gravelly, but not unkind. Lily Rose's shoulders tensed. She recognized it. Sheriff Tom Garrett, the tall man with the silver badge who sometimes came in for coffee and to break up fights. She'd seen him watching her work before, those gray eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "I'll work faster, sir," she whispered, not lifting her head. "I promise I'll do better." "That's not what I meant." She felt him crouch down beside her, close enough that she could smell leather and gun oil and something else. Soap, maybe, or shaving cream. Clean smells, safe smells. "What's your name, girl?" She hesitated. Giving her real name meant questions. Questions meant people looking for her. "Lily Rose, sir." "Lily Rose what?" Her throat tightened. I don't remember my family name, sir. Haven't had one for a long time." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. When Sheriff Garrett finally spoke again, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "When's the last time you ate something, Lily Rose?" Lily Rose stared at the sheriff's weathered boots, afraid to meet his eyes. When had she last eaten? The question hung in the air like smoke from the oil lamp. She tried to remember. Maybe yesterday morning when Martha had tossed her a heel of stale bread, or was that the day before? "I don't want to take more than what's offered, sir," she whispered. "Martha feeds me when there's extra." Sheriff Garrett was quiet for a long moment. She could hear him breathing, steady and calm, while her own heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. Then she heard him stand, his boots creaking against the floorboards as he walked toward the bar. "Martha!" His voice boomed through the saloon. "Martha Crane, get out here!" Lily Rose's stomach dropped. This was it. He was going to tell Martha about her slacking, about how she'd been scrubbing the same spot, about how she wasn't worth the trouble. She pressed her forehead against the floor, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Heavy footsteps came down the back stairs, followed by Martha's irritated voice. "What in blazes are you hollering about, Tom Garrett? Some of us are trying to sleep." Martha appeared in her nightgown and robe, gray hair in curlers, looking none too pleased about being roused at this hour. She glanced at Lily Rose kneeling on the floor, then at the sheriff standing by the bar with his arms crossed. "When's the last time you fed that child?" Tom asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Martha's eyes narrowed. "I feed her when there's scraps. Same as any stray." "She's not a stray, Martha. She's a little girl. She's a runaway from Pine Bluff, and you know it. I could get in trouble just for keeping her here." Martha pulled her robe tighter. "But I've been decent about it. She's got a place to sleep, and she earns her keep." Tom stepped closer to Martha, his voice dropping even lower. "Earning her keep? She's 10 years old, working herself to the bone for table scraps. Look at her, Martha, really look." For the first time since Lily Rose had arrived, Martha actually studied her. The way her shoulder blades poked through the thin fabric of her dress, how her wrists looked like bird bones, the hollow circles under her eyes. Something shifted in the older woman's expression. I didn't realize she was quite so—" Martha trailed off. "Starving?" Tom finished. "When's the last time you gave her a real meal? Meat, vegetables, something that'll keep her alive?" Martha's cheeks flushed red. "Now see here, Tom Garrett. I'm not running a charity house. That girl showed up here on her own, and I've done more than most would." Tom walked back to where Lily Rose knelt frozen on the floor. Without a word, he reached down and gently took the scrub brush from her hands. His fingers were warm and calloused, like he'd worked with his hands his whole life. "Stand up, child." Lily Rose struggled to her feet, legs shaking from kneeling so long. She still couldn't bring herself to look at his face, but she could feel him studying her, taking in every detail of her pitiful state. "How old are you, Lily Rose?" 10, sir. Maybe 11. I'm not sure." He was quiet for another long moment. Then he turned back to Martha, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of his badge. "You're going to fix her a plate." real food, and you're going to give her a proper place to sleep, not some corner on the floor. Tom, I can't afford to. I'll pay for her meals, he said simply, and her clothes, and anything else she needs. Lily Rose's head snapped up, finally meeting his eyes. They were gray like storm clouds, but kind. So kind it made her chest hurt. You don't have to do that, sir, she whispered. I can work harder. I can clean better. I won't be any trouble. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He crouched down again, this time meeting her at eye level. You're not trouble, Lily Rose. And you don't have to earn your right to eat. He paused, studying her face. You remind me of someone. Martha crossed her arms. You're Emma? Tom's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. She would have been about your age now. Lily Rose didn't understand what they were talking about, but she could see the hurt in the sheriff's eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand, just for a second, quick as a bird landing on a branch. I'm sorry for your loss, sir. He stared at her small hand, then at her face, like he was seeing something that surprised him. When he stood up, his voice was steady but softer than before. Martha, fix the child a plate, ham if you've got it, biscuits, whatever vegetables are left from supper. He pulled a silver dollar from his pocket and placed it on the bar. And tomorrow, you'll start treating her like what she is, a little girl who needs looking after, not free labor. Martha looked at the coin, then at Lily Rose, then back at Tom. Finally, she sighed and nodded. All right, Tom, but you better know what you're getting yourself into. I do, he said quietly. But as Lily Rose watched him walk toward the door, his boots echoing in the empty saloon, she wondered if either of them really understood what had just begun. All she knew was that for the first time in years, someone had stood up for her. Someone had seen her not as a burden or a pair of working hands, but as a person worth protecting. And that changed everything. The plate Martha set before Lily Rose that night was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Thick slices of ham still warm from the pan, fluffy biscuits with real butter melting into golden pools, and green beans that actually had flavor instead of tasting like dirty water. Her hands shook as she picked up the fork. Go on, Martha said, her voice gentler than usual. Eat before it gets cold. Lily Rose took a small bite, then another, trying not to wolf it down like the starving animal she was. The ham was salty and rich, the biscuits soft as clouds. She had to stop twice to wipe tears from her cheeks, overwhelmed by the simple act of eating real food. Sheriff Garrett had left after giving Martha strict instructions about Lily Rose's care, but his presence lingered in the saloon like the scent of his leather coat. For the first time since arriving in Copper Ridge, Lily Rose felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: hope. The next morning brought changes. Martha led her to a small storage room behind the kitchen that had been hastily cleared of whiskey crates and gambling supplies. A narrow cot sat against one wall, covered with clean blankets that smelled of lavender soap. It's not much, Martha said, avoiding Lily Rose's eyes, but it's private and warm. Lily Rose ran her fingers over the wool blanket, softer than anything she'd touched in years. It's perfect, ma'am. Thank you. Don't thank me, thank the sheriff. He's the one paying for your keep. Martha's voice carried a note of something, maybe respect, maybe worry. And he left these. On the small wooden crate that served as a table sat a pair of boots. Not new, but sturdy leather with thick soles and no holes. Beside them lay a wool dress in deep blue, simple but well made, and a warm shawl the color of autumn leaves. Lily Rose stared at the gifts, afraid to touch them. He bought these for me? Came by this morning before his rounds. Said every child deserves clothes that fit and shoes without holes. Martha cleared her throat. Said you reminded him of his daughter. What happened to her? Martha's expression softened with old grief. Fever took her and his wife 3 years back, some kind of illness that swept through town. Tom, well, he hasn't been the same since. Throws himself into his work, keeps everyone at arm's length. She studied Lily Rose carefully. Until now. Over the following days, a routine developed. Lily Rose still cleaned the saloon, but only during reasonable hours and with proper breaks for meals. She swept and mopped and polished, but Martha no longer demanded perfection from floors that would be dirty again by evening. The work felt different now, not desperate survival, but contribution to something larger than herself. Sheriff Garrett came by each morning for coffee and to check on her progress. He never said much, just watched her work with those thoughtful gray eyes and asked simple questions. How was she sleeping? Was Martha treating her fairly? Did she need anything? But it was the small gestures that meant the most. He fixed the wobbly leg on her cot without being asked. When she mentioned missing the stars, he cleared a path to the saloon's back door so she could step outside at night. He even brought her a book, a collection of fairy tales with beautiful illustrations that she treasured more than gold. You can read? He asked one evening, finding her curled up with the book by lamplight. Some. My mama taught me before. She trailed off, not wanting to finish that sentence. Before what, Lily Rose? She looked up at him, this man who'd shown her more kindness in 2 weeks than she'd received in years. Something in his patient expression made her want to tell the truth. Before the fever took her. Same kind that took your family, maybe. I was 7 when she died. Been on my own since then. Sheriff Garrett sat down heavily in the chair across from her, his weathered hands clasped together. 3 years in that orphanage? Yes, sir. Until I couldn't stand it anymore. She closed the book carefully, running her fingers over the worn cover. Director Blackwood, he wasn't kind to children who had nobody to visit them. What do you mean? Lily Rose pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. He said we were God's burden, and it was his job to make sure we earned our keep. Extra work, less food, time in the cellar when we complained. She looked up at him. But you probably already know that. Being the law and all. Tom's jaw clenched. Pine Bluff Orphanage is outside my jurisdiction. Falls under territorial authority. His voice carried frustration and something darker. But I've heard rumors. They're not rumors, sir. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, Sheriff Garrett stood and walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. My Emma used to love fairy tales, he said quietly. Her favorite was Cinderella. Said she liked how the girl kept being kind, even when everyone was cruel to her. Lily Rose's chest tightened. I'm sorry I reminded you of sad things, sir. He turned around, and to her surprise, he was almost smiling. You don't remind me of sad things, Lily Rose. You remind me that there's still good in this world, worth protecting. That night, as she lay in her small but clean room, Lily Rose allowed herself to imagine staying. Not just for days or weeks, but longer. Maybe learning to help Martha with the cooking. Maybe going to the schoolhouse with the other children in town. Maybe having a family again. Even if it was just her, a gruff saloon owner, and a sheriff with kind eyes who understood loss. She was still dreaming of possibilities when the knock came at the saloon's front door just after midnight. Sharp, official, and carrying the weight of authority that would change everything once again. But for now, wrapped in warm blankets and surrounded by the first real kindness she'd known in years, Lily Rose finally felt safe enough to sleep without one eye open, listening for footsteps in the dark. The midnight knocking shattered the peaceful quiet like gunshots. Lily Rose bolted upright in her narrow cot, heart hammering as the sharp raps echoed through the silver dollar. She'd been dreaming of her mother's lullabies, but the sound dragged her back to harsh reality with brutal efficiency. Heavy boots crossed the saloon floor above her. Martha's voice, sharp with irritation and worry. Then another voice, official, cold, unfamiliar. Lily Rose crept to her door and pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear. Martha Crane? I'm Marshal Wade Sterling, Territorial Authority. I'm here about the girl. Martha's response was guarded. What girl? Don't play games with me, ma'am. Lily Rose, the runaway from Pine Bluff Orphanage. We know she's here. Lily Rose's blood turned to ice water. Her small hands clenched into fists as she fought the urge to run, to bolt through the back door and disappear into the Arizona night. But where would she go? How far could a 10-year-old girl get on foot before they caught her? The child's under protection, Martha said firmly. Sheriff Garrett's handling her case. Sheriff Garrett has no jurisdiction over territorial wards. The girl belongs to Pine Bluff, and Director Blackwood wants her returned immediately. The front door slammed open with enough force to rattle the windows. Heavy footsteps, different ones, familiar ones, crossed the floor with purpose. Marshal Sterling? Sheriff Garrett's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Interesting time for a social call. Sheriff, I'm here on official business. The runaway girl needs to be returned to proper custody. Proper custody? Tom's voice carried a dangerous edge. You mean the orphanage where children disappear into work camps and coal mines? Where a 10-year-old girl would rather sleep behind garbage piles than stay another night? Director Blackwood runs a respectable institution. The girl is a troublemaker who's been filling heads with lies about conditions there. Lily Rose heard a chair scrape against the floor. Then Tom's voice, closer now and deadly quiet. Marshal, I've seen what passes for respectable at Pine Bluff. The territorial government might turn a blind eye to child labor and abuse, but I won't. You're overstepping your authority, Garrett. No, I'm protecting a child, and I've got the paperwork to prove it's legal. Silence stretched long enough that Lily Rose wondered if they could hear her heart pounding through the floor. Then Marshal Sterling spoke again, skepticism dripping from every word. What paperwork? Emergency guardianship petition, filed yesterday with Judge Morrison in Flagstone. Temporary custody pending full review. Morrison? He's been sick for weeks, hasn't seen anyone. Tom's voice carried grim satisfaction. Got better yesterday. Amazing what a personal visit from a concerned lawman can accomplish. Lily Rose pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob of relief. He'd fought for her. Actually fought for her, with papers and legal words and the kind of protection she'd never dared hope for. But Marshal Sterling wasn't finished. Temporary custody doesn't mean permanent, and Director Blackwood has influential friends in the territorial capital. This won't stand. Then they'll have to come through me to get her. You'd risk your badge for one runaway orphan? The pause felt like an eternity. When Tom finally spoke, his voice was steady as stone. I'd risk everything for her. Footsteps moved toward the door, but Sterling's voice stopped them. This isn't over, Garrett. The territorial authority doesn't take kindly to local sheriffs interfering with established institutions. You're making powerful enemies. Good. I was getting tired of making friends with people who hurt children. The door slammed shut with enough force to shake dust from the rafters. Lily Rose heard Martha muttering under her breath, then Tom's heavy footsteps approaching the back of the saloon. She scrambled back into bed and pulled the blankets up to her chin, pretending to sleep. A soft knock came at her door. Lily Rose? You awake, child? She sat up slowly, as if roused from deep sleep. Sheriff Garrett? He opened the door a crack, lamplight from the main room casting his shadow long across her small space. Everything's all right. Go back to sleep. I heard voices. Was someone looking for me? Tom stepped into the room and sat down heavily in the wooden chair beside her cot. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the worry lines that seemed deeper than before. Yes, but they're gone now, and they can't take you. I made sure of that. The marshal said I belonged to Pine Bluff. You don't belong to anyone, Lily Rose. You're a person, not property. His voice was gentle but firm. And I filed papers that say you're under my protection now. She stared at him in the lamplight, this man who'd stood between her and the forces that wanted to drag her back to hell. You'd really fight the territorial government for me? I already did. But why? I'm nobody special, just another orphan nobody wants. Tom reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, with surprising gentleness. You're special to me, and sometimes one person thinking you're worth protecting is all it takes to change everything. Lily Rose felt tears prick her eyes. What if they come back with more men? What if they take you away for helping me? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now you're safe. That's what matters. He stood to leave, but her small voice stopped him at the door. Sheriff Garrett? Yes? Thank you. For fighting for me. Nobody's ever done that before. His shoulders sagged slightly, and when he turned back, his eyes held a mixture of sadness and determination that made him look both older and younger at the same time. Everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them, Lily Rose. Everyone. After he left, Lily Rose lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her young life, she understood what it meant to have someone on her side. Really, truly on her side. Not because they had to be, not because she was useful, but because they chose to be. She pulled the wool blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she might actually be safe. But even as sleep took her, a small part of her mind wondered how long it would last. In her experience, good things always came with a price. And somewhere in the territorial capital, powerful men were already calculating what that price would be. 3 weeks passed in careful peace. Lily Rose settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, helping Martha with morning chores, reading her fairy tale book in the afternoon sun, and sharing quiet conversations with Sheriff Garrett when he stopped by for his evening coffee. She even ventured into town with Martha once, marveling at the general store's shelves lined with goods she'd only dreamed of. But peace in Copper Ridge proved as fragile as morning frost. The boy appeared on a Tuesday, stumbling down Main Street like a ghost walking in daylight. Lily Rose spotted him first from the saloon's front window, maybe 8 years old, clothes torn and filthy, one arm hanging at an odd angle. He collapsed just outside the Silver Dollar's doors. Martha, Lily Rose called, rushing outside despite the older woman's protests about proper behavior for young ladies. The boy was conscious but barely, his face streaked with tears and dust. Up close she could see the bruises, fresh ones, purple and swollen, older ones yellowed with healing. His left shoulder sat wrong, clearly dislocated. Please, he whispered when he saw her. They said, someone here helps kids like us. Martha appeared beside them, took one look at the boy's condition, and her face hardened with familiar anger. Get him inside. Now. They carried him to the back room where Lily Rose had first slept. Martha sent her running for Sheriff Garrett while she cleaned the boy's wounds with gentle efficiency that surprised them both. Tom arrived within minutes, taking in the scene with the practiced eye of a lawman who'd seen too much cruelty. He knelt beside the makeshift bed where the boy lay, his voice carefully soft. What's your name, son? Danny, the boy whispered. Danny Reeves. Where'd you come from, Danny? Copper Creek mining camp, up in the hills. Danny's good hand clutched at the blanket. My pa died in a cave-in last month. Foreman said I had to work off pa's debts. Been loading ore cars since dawn, getting the strap when I couldn't keep up. Lily Rose felt sick. She knew that hollow look in Danny's eyes, the way he flinched when Tom moved too quickly, the same terror she'd carried for years. Who told you to come here? Tom asked. One of the older boys. Said there was a sheriff in Copper Ridge who stood up for kids nobody wanted. Said he took in a girl from Pine Bluff. Danny's eyes found Lily Rose. That you? She nodded, moving closer to the bed. I'm Lily Rose. You're safe now. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. Danny was different from her situation. He wasn't a runaway from a territorial institution, but essentially an indentured servant to a private mining operation. The legal complications made her head spin. Tom seemed to be thinking the same thing. Danny, do you have any family? Anyone who might be looking for you? No, sir. Pa was all I had. Foreman Patterson, he's got papers saying I owe the company for Pa's room and board. Says I got to work till I'm 16 to pay it off. That's slavery, Martha said bluntly from the doorway. Dressing it up in legal language doesn't change what it is. The territorial courts might not see it that way, Tom replied grimly. Child labor contracts are still legal under territorial law. Over the next 2 days, while Danny recovered from exhaustion and had his shoulder properly set by the town doctor, more details emerged. The Copper Creek operation was one of several mining camps that employed orphaned children under dubious contracts. The territorial government looked the other way, as long as taxes were paid and profits flowed to the right pockets. We can't send him back, Lily Rose told Tom one evening as they watched Danny sleep fitfully. It'll kill him. I know, but hiding him here makes me an accomplice to theft of company property. That's how they'll see it. Then we make it legal. Like you did for me. Tom studied her face in the lamplight. It's more complicated with Danny. You were fleeing abuse at a territorial institution. He's bound by a private contract. A contract signed by a dead man for a child who can't read. Martha's voice carried steel. Any decent judge would throw it out. Any decent judge, yes, but Judge Blackwood down in Flagstone is in the mining company's pockets. Has been for years. Lily Rose felt something cold settle in her stomach. Blackwood? Like Director Blackwood from Pine Bluff? His brother, Cornelius Blackwood, controls half the territorial court system, and word is he's already asking questions about what happened with your case. The implications hit like a physical blow. They weren't just protecting one child anymore. They were taking on a network of powerful men who saw children as commodities to be bought, sold, and worked until they broke. That night, Lily Rose couldn't sleep. She found herself standing in the saloon's main room, staring out at the dark street and thinking about all the other children still trapped in places like Pine Bluff and Copper Creek. How many were suffering while she slept safe and warm? How many would never find their way to someone willing to fight for them? Can't sleep either? She turned to find Tom standing at the bottom of the stairs, fully dressed despite the late hour. I keep thinking about the other kids, she said quietly. The ones still trapped. Me too. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lily Rose voiced the thought that had been growing in her mind. What if we didn't just hide them? What if we made this place an official sanctuary? Somewhere children could come when they had nowhere else to go. Tom looked at her with something like surprise. That's a dangerous idea, Lily Rose. It would mean going up against some very powerful people. You already went up against them for me, and for Danny. That's different. That was just 2 children. But there will be more. You know there will be. She turned to face him fully. Danny found his way here because word is spreading. Other kids will come too, whether we're ready or not. Tom rubbed his jaw. The gesture she'd learned meant he was thinking hard about something difficult. An official sanctuary would need legal backing, licensing from the territorial government, inspections, regulations, oversight from the very people we're trying to protect these children from. Then we do it unofficial, like the Underground Railroad my mama used to tell me about. A safe house that doesn't advertise, but helps anyone who needs it. Tom stared at her for a long moment. You understand what you're suggesting? It would mean constant danger. People trying to shut us down, take the children back, maybe worse. I understand. She squared her small shoulders. But I also understand what it's like to have nowhere to go and no one who cares if you live or die. If we can save even one child from that feeling, isn't it worth the risk? Something shifted in Tom's expression. Pride mixed with worry, determination tempered by fear. Your mother raised you right, Lily Rose. She'd be proud of the woman you're becoming. Does that mean you'll consider it? It means I'll think about it, but first, we need to make sure Danny's safe, one step at a time. But even as he said it, they both knew the decision had already been made. The moment Tom chose to protect Lily Rose, he'd started down a path that would lead them here, to a place where turning away meant abandoning their principles and moving forward meant risking everything they'd built. In the morning, they would begin planning not just for Danny's protection, but for all the children who would inevitably follow. Because in a territory where the powerful preyed on the powerless, someone had to stand in the gap. Even if that someone was just a sheriff, a saloon owner, and a determined 10-year-old girl who remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. Word traveled fast in the Arizona territory, carried by miners, traders, and the kind of men who made their living knowing other people's business. Within a month of Danny's arrival, 3 more children found their way to the Silver Dollar's back door, a pair of sisters whose parents died of typhoid, and a Mexican boy named Miguel, whose family had been killed by bandits. Each arrival brought new complications. The sisters, aged 12 and 14, came with a legal guardian who'd been selling their labor to textile mills. Miguel spoke little English and carried scars that told stories no child should know, but they also brought something else, hope. Word was spreading through the territory's shadows that there was a place in Copper Ridge where unwanted children could find safety. Sheriff Garrett's informal sanctuary was becoming impossible to hide. The first official notice came on a Thursday morning, delivered by a nervous postal clerk who couldn't meet Tom's eyes. The territorial seal on the envelope made Lily Rose's stomach clench with familiar dread. "What does it say?" Martha asked, as Tom read the letter twice, his jaw growing tighter with each word. "Formal inquiry from the Territorial Bureau of Child Welfare. They're sending an inspector next week to investigate reports of unlawful harboring of territorial wards and contracted minors." "Who signed it?" Lily Rose asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Judge Cornelius Blackwood himself." Tom folded the letter carefully, but she could see his hands trembling slightly. "He's not just investigating, he's bringing territorial marshals with him." Martha slammed her coffee cup down hard enough to crack the saucer. "Marshals? For children? For people interfering with territorial business interests?" Tom's voice was grim. "The mining companies, the mills, the work farms, they've lost too much property to ignore us anymore." Danny, who'd been helping Miguel with his English lessons at the kitchen table, looked up with fear in his young eyes. "They're coming for us, aren't they?" "Nobody's taking you anywhere," Lily Rose said firmly, moving to stand beside him. "Sheriff Garrett won't let them." But even as she spoke the words, she could see the weight pressing down on Tom's shoulders. One sheriff against territorial marshals, corrupt judges, and powerful business interests. The odds were stacked against them in ways that made her earlier rescue seem simple by comparison. That afternoon, the first act of sabotage occurred. Someone cut the Silver Dollar's water line during the night, flooding the back rooms where the children slept. When Tom investigated, he found footprints leading to the edge of town and fresh horse tracks, professionals who knew how to cover their trails. "Warning shot," Martha muttered as they mopped muddy water from the floors. "Next time it'll be worse." She was right. 2 days later, a fire started in the saloon's storage shed, conveniently when all the adults were at the front of the building. Only Miguel's sharp eyes spotted the smoke in time to raise the alarm. They saved the building, but the message was clear: stop harboring children or face escalating consequences. The children began to change under the pressure. Miguel, who'd started smiling again, retreated into watchful silence. The sisters huddled together, whispering fearfully about what would happen if their guardian found them. Danny stopped eating properly, his thin frame growing even more fragile. "This isn't fair to them," Tom told Lily Rose one evening as they watched the children through the kitchen window, living in constant fear, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Sending them back isn't fair either," she replied. "At least here they're scared but loved. Out there, they're just scared." Tom studied her face in the lamplight. "You've grown up fast these past months." "Had to. Someone needs to help you carry this weight. You're 10 years old, Lily Rose. This shouldn't be your burden." "Maybe not, but it is." She turned to face him fully. "You taught me that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting burdens we didn't ask for. Well, I didn't ask to be an orphan, but I am. I didn't ask to understand what these children are going through, but I do. And I didn't ask to love them all like family, but I do." Her words hit him like a physical blow. "Family? What else would you call it? We're not related by blood, but we choose to protect each other. We share what we have. We fight for each other." She gestured toward the children. "If that's not family, what is?" Before Tom could answer, a commotion erupted outside. Shouting voices, the thunder of multiple horses, the sound of official authority descending on their small sanctuary. Through the window, they could see torches bobbing in the darkness and the glint of badge metal catching firelight. "They're early," Tom said grimly, reaching for his gun belt. "How many?" Martha asked from the doorway. "Too many." Tom checked his revolver with practiced efficiency. 4 marshals, maybe 5, plus whoever they brought from town. Lily Rose felt the familiar ice-cold fear creeping up her spine. But this time it was different. This time she wasn't just afraid for herself. She was terrified for all of them. For Danny, who'd already been through too much. For Miguel, who was just learning to trust again. For the sisters, who'd found their first real home in months. A commanding voice boomed across the night air. "This is Marshal Wade Sterling, Territorial Authority. We have warrants for the removal of unlawfully harbored minors. Send them out now, or we'll come in after them." Tom stepped onto the front porch, hands visible but ready. "Marshal Sterling, bit late for official business, isn't it?" "Official business doesn't keep regular hours, Sheriff. Where are the children?" "Which children would those be?" Sterling's voice turned dangerous. "Don't play games with me, Garrett. We know you've got at least 5 territorial wards in there. Hand them over and we might forget about charging you with obstruction. And if I refuse? Then we'll take them anyway, and you'll be wearing shackles on the trip to the territorial prison." Inside the saloon, the children had gathered around Lily Rose, their faces pale with terror in the lamplight. She looked at each of them. Danny's quiet courage, Miguel's fierce determination despite his fear. The sisters clinging to each other, but ready to fight. "What do we do?" Danny whispered. Lily Rose thought of all the nights she'd spent scrubbing floors and dreaming of safety, of the moment Tom first stood up for her, of the family they'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. "We stick together," she said quietly. "Whatever happens, we don't let them separate us." Outside, the standoff continued, but inside the Silver Dollar, 5 children and 2 adults prepared to fight for something more precious than law or order or territorial authority. They were fighting for family, and family, Lily Rose had learned, was worth any price, even if that price was everything they'd built together. The marshals were closing in, and the real battle was about to begin. The standoff stretched into its second hour as more figures emerged from the darkness. Not just territorial marshals, but men Lily Rose didn't recognize. Rough-looking types with guns and hard faces who clearly weren't bound by any oath to serve justice. "Bounty hunters," Tom muttered, watching them position themselves around the saloon's perimeter. "Someone's paying good money to make sure we don't slip away." From the front porch, Marshal Sterling's voice carried renewed authority. "Last chance, Garrett. Send out the children, and maybe you'll live to see trial." "Over my dead body," Tom called back, his hand steady on his gun. That can be arranged. Inside, the children huddled in the back room, while Martha barricaded the windows with overturned tables. Lily Rose found herself thinking of the stories Tom had read to her from the fairy tale book. Tales where good triumphed over evil through courage and cleverness, rather than superior firepower. "There's too many of them for a straight fight," she whispered to Tom as he checked the back door's locks. "I know, but running isn't an option either. They've got the whole building surrounded." A new voice cut through the night, older, more refined, dripping with the kind of authority that came from money and political connections. "Sheriff Garrett, this is Judge Cornelius Blackwood. I've come personally to resolve this matter." Tom's face went pale. Blackwood himself. "This is worse than I thought." Through a gap in the barricaded window, Lily Rose could see a tall man in an expensive coat stepping into the torchlight. Even at this distance, his resemblance to Director Blackwood from Pine Bluff was unmistakable, the same cold eyes, the same cruel mouth that smiled without warmth. "You've caused considerable trouble, Sheriff," Blackwood continued, "interfering with legitimate business contracts, harboring territorial wards, corrupting the moral order of this territory. But I'm a reasonable man. Surrender the children now, and I'll see that you're transferred to a different county rather than imprisoned." "What about the children?" Tom shouted back. "They'll be returned to their proper places. The boy Danny will resume his contract with the mining company. The Mexican child will be placed in a work program more suited to his background. The others will be distributed among institutions that can better handle troublesome cases." Lily Rose felt sick. She knew what troublesome cases meant. The kinds of places where children disappeared entirely, ground down by work and brutality until there was nothing left of who they used to be. "And me?" she called out, her young voice carrying clearly in the night air. Silence stretched for a long moment. Then Blackwood's cultured tones turned sharp with malice. "Miss Lily Rose, you've been quite the little instigator, haven't you? Don't worry. We have special arrangements for children who corrupt others with ideas of rebellion, places where such tendencies can be corrected." Tom's face went deadly white. He started toward the door, but Lily Rose caught his arm. "Don't. That's what he wants, for you to come out angry and give him an excuse to shoot you. I won't let them take you back to that hell. Then we need to be smarter than them." She looked around the room, taking inventory of their resources and options. "How well do you know the old mining tunnels under the town?" Tom's eyes sharpened with sudden understanding. "The silver mines? They've been abandoned for years, but—" He trailed off, clearly thinking. "But they connect to the whole area, don't they? I've heard the miners talking about how they honeycomb the hills. Some of them come up near the church, others by the creek." He studied her face. "You're thinking of running." "I'm thinking of disappearing long enough for help to arrive. You said you sent word to Judge Morrison in Flagstone before. How long would it take him to get here with federal marshals?" 2 days, maybe 3 if he can gather enough men." Martha spoke up from her position by the window. "The old mine entrance behind the church. I know it well. My late husband worked those tunnels before the silver played out." Outside, Blackwood's patience was wearing thin. "You have 5 minutes to decide, Sheriff. After that, we come in shooting, and any casualties are on your head." "The tunnel entrance," Lily Rose whispered urgently. "How do we get there without being seen?" "Root cellar," Martha said suddenly. "Connects to the old mining company's storage tunnels. Haven't used it in years, but the passage should still be clear." Tom looked between them, torn between hope and desperation. "Even if we make it to the tunnels, they'll hunt us down like animals. Blackwood has men and resources we can't match." "Maybe, but we'll be buying time for Morrison to arrive with federal authority, and sometimes time is all you need to change everything." A commotion outside drew their attention. New voices, angry shouts, the sound of horses approaching fast. Through the gap in the window, they could see torches converging on someone in the street. "What in blazes?" Martha peered out carefully, then her face broke into a fierce grin. "Well, I'll be damned. It's Father Miguel from the mission, and he's brought half the Mexican families from the valley. Lily Rose pressed her face to the window. Sure enough, a crowd of people had materialized in the street. Men, women, even children, all standing between the bounty hunters and the saloon. At their head stood a small priest with steel in his spine, facing down Judge Blackwood without flinching. "You will not harm these children," Father Miguel declared, in accented but clear English. "They are under the protection of God and this community." Blackwood's voice turned venomous. "This is official territorial business, priest. These people have no legal standing here." "Perhaps not. But we have moral standing, and we outnumber your hired guns 3-1. The crowd murmured agreement, and Lily Rose could see the bounty hunters looking nervous. They'd been hired to intimidate a sheriff and some children, not to start a shooting war with half the territory's Mexican population. Inside the saloon, Tom stood straighter, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time that night. "The people of Copper Ridge know what's right," he said quietly. "Maybe we're not as alone as we thought." Another voice joined the crowd outside, Dr. Patterson, the town physician, his medical bag in hand. "Judge Blackwood, I've examined these children. They show clear signs of abuse and malnutrition from their previous placements. As a medical professional, I cannot in good conscience allow them to be returned to harmful situations." More voices joined in. The school teacher, several shopkeepers, even some of the saloon's regular customers. One by one, the decent people of Copper Ridge were taking a stand. But Blackwood wasn't finished. His voice cut through the crowd like a whip. "Very touching, but you're all interfering with territorial law. Marshal Sterling, arrest anyone who prevents us from carrying out our lawful duties." Sterling stepped forward, but his hand wasn't on his gun. Instead, he was holding a piece of paper. "Actually, Judge, there's been a development. Federal Marshal Morrison just arrived with a federal warrant superseding your territorial authority. Something about investigating corruption and child trafficking in territorial institutions." The silence that followed was so complete that Lily Rose could hear her own heartbeat. Then Blackwood's voice, no longer smooth and controlled, but tight with barely contained rage. "Federal interference in territorial matters is legal and binding," came a new voice from the edge of the crowd. A tall man in a federal marshal's coat stepped into the torchlight, flanked by 6 armed deputies. "Judge Morrison sends his regards, Blackwood. He's very interested in having a conversation with you about your recent business dealings." The tide had turned completely. The bounty hunters melted away into the darkness. Sterling and his territorial marshals found themselves outnumbered and outranked. And Judge Cornelius Blackwood, the man who'd terrorized countless children across the territory, stood alone in a circle of hostile faces. Inside the saloon, Lily Rose felt tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. They'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd actually won. But even as the federal marshals took Blackwood into custody and the crowd began to disperse, she knew this was just the beginning. There would be other corrupt officials, other children in need, other battles to fight. The difference was, now they knew they weren't fighting alone. Spring arrived early in Copper Ridge that year, painting the desert hills with wildflowers and bringing news that traveled faster than any stagecoach. Judge Cornelius Blackwood had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for corruption, child trafficking, and conspiracy. Director Blackwood of Pine Bluff Orphanage faced similar charges. The territorial government, under federal scrutiny, began reforming child welfare laws with real oversight and protection. But the most important changes happened quietly, in the rooms above the Silver Dollar Saloon, where 5 children had learned what family really meant. Lily Rose stood at her bedroom window. No longer the small storage closet, but a proper room with real furniture and curtains Martha had sewn by hand. At 11 years old, she was taller now, her face fuller from regular meals and her eyes bright with the confidence that came from being truly loved. The wooden floor beneath her feet, The same floor she'd once scrubbed with bleeding knuckles now felt like home. Down in the main room, the sounds of breakfast drifted up through the floorboards. Danny's laughter as he helped Miguel practice reading English. The sisters, Sarah and Emma, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to feed the chickens they'd started raising behind the building. Martha's gruff voice calling for someone to fetch more eggs, though everyone knew she'd softened into the grandmother none of them had ever had. Sheriff Garrett, Tom, as he'd finally allowed them all to call him, sat at the kitchen table reviewing the morning's correspondence. Letters arrived weekly now from across the territory, some from families seeking lost children, others from people wanting to help, and increasingly from government officials working to establish legitimate safe houses for abandoned and abused children. "Morning mail," Tom said as Lily Rose joined him for breakfast. "Judge Morrison wants to know if you'd be willing to testify before the territorial legislature about reform measures." "Me? In front of politicians?" "You started something here, Lily Rose. People want to hear from someone who lived through the old system and helped build something better." She considered this while spreading butter on a warm biscuit. Real butter, not the rancid lard they'd served at Pine Bluff. The idea of speaking to powerful men still made her nervous, but she thought of all the children still trapped in places like she'd escaped from. "What would I tell them?" "The truth, about what it's like to be forgotten by the system, about how one person choosing to care can change everything." Danny looked up from his spelling practice. "Will you tell them about how you taught us that family isn't just blood, and how you showed us that home is a feeling, not just a place?" Sarah added. Miguel nodded enthusiastically, his English much improved. "Tell them how the sheriff, he fight for us when nobody else would." Tom's face colored slightly. "This isn't about me. It's about what you children have built here." "What we built together," Lily Rose corrected firmly. "None of us could have done it alone." Martha bustled in with a plate of eggs, her gray hair pinned up and her apron dusted with flour. "Speaking of building things together, we've got a decision to make. Father Miguel stopped by yesterday. Says there's a family down in Tucson. Parents died of cholera, left behind 3 little ones. Youngest is barely 5. The room fell quiet. They all knew what this meant. Their small, makeshift family had room for 3 more, but it would mean more risk, more attention from authorities, more mouths to feed on Tom's sheriff's salary. "What do you think?" Tom asked, looking around the table at each of them. "I think," Lily Rose said slowly, "that we didn't fight all those battles just to keep the door closed to other children who need help." Danny nodded firmly. "We got room in the loft. And Sarah's teaching me to cook so we can stretch the food further." "I can help with the little ones," Emma offered. "I remember what it was like being scared and not understanding why the adults couldn't protect us." Miguel simply said, "Family grows when love grows." Tom looked at Martha, who was trying to hide a smile behind her stern expression. "Well, what's the verdict, Martha Crane?" "The verdict," she said, untying her apron with a flourish, "is that this old saloon has seen too much loneliness already. Time it saw some more joy." 6 months later, the Silver Dollar was officially licensed as the Copper Ridge Children's Home, the first territorially approved safe house with federal backing and funding. Tom served as director while maintaining his sheriff duties, Martha as head of household operations, and Lily Rose as what the paperwork called peer counselor, helping new arrivals adjust to the revolutionary idea that they were valued for who they were, not what they could produce. The original 5 children remained, though they were children no longer. Danny, now 9, helped teach the younger ones basic reading and arithmetic. Sarah and Emma, 14 and 16, assisted with meal preparation and laundry while attending the local school. Miguel had become the house translator, helping Spanish-speaking children feel welcome and understood. But it was Lily Rose who sat with each new arrival on their first night, sharing her own story and helping them understand that the nightmare was over. I used to scrub these floors every night, she told a frightened 7-year-old girl who'd arrived that afternoon from a failed homestead. Thought if I worked hard enough, maybe someone would decide I was worth keeping. But Tom taught me something important. You don't have to earn love. Real love just is. The girl clutched a rag doll with one arm missing, her eyes wide and uncertain. What if they change their minds? What if they send me away? Lily Rose smiled, remembering asking the same question what felt like a lifetime ago. Then we'll fight for you, just like Tom fought for me. Just like this whole town fought for all of us. Because that's what families do. They fight for each other. As the sun set over Copper Ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lily Rose stood on the front porch of the Silver Dollar, no longer a saloon, but a home that had sheltered 23 children over the past 2 years. Some had been reunited with distant relatives. Others had been adopted by local families. But all had learned the same lesson she'd discovered that first night when Tom Garrett chose to see her as a person worth protecting. Everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them. And sometimes, when you were lucky enough to find that person, you got the chance to become that person for someone else. The wooden floors inside were polished now, cared for by many hands that worked from love rather than desperation. And in the evening light, with the sound of children's laughter echoing through rooms once filled only with the clink of whiskey glasses and the shuffle of cards, Lily Rose knew her mother would be proud. She'd found her way home. And in doing so, she'd helped create a place where no child would ever again have to scrub floors with bleeding hands just to prove they deserved to exist. The Silver Dollar had become exactly what Tom always said it could be, not just a sanctuary, but a family. And family, Lily Rose had learned, was the most powerful force in any territory.